All right, breaking news now coming in, and the United States has now clarified on the H-1B visa issue. The White House says that this is a one-time fee only for the new visas, and it is not for the renewals or current visa holders. According to the statement, it says that President Trump promised to put American workers first, and this common sense action does just that by discouraging companies from spamming the systems and driving down wages. It also gives certainty to American business who actually want to bring high-skilled workers to our great country but have been trampled by abusers of the system. This is what the White House spokeswoman Taylor Rogers has mentioned. This is a one-time fee that applies only to the petition. It only applies to new visas, not renewables or current visa holders. It will first apply in the next upcoming lottery cycle, is what the White House says. And NDTV's Priyanka Deona joins us to get us more on this. Priyanka, take us through the details. The United States has now clarified on its stand. Give us the details.
There has been a lot of uncertainty. I have walked the streets of Chicago to try and talk to H-1B holders. Everyone is really scared because of the uncertainty. The White House is defending this new executive order as common sense action to put American workers first. And as you said, spokeswoman Taylor Rogers argues that it will stop companies as well as individuals from spamming or taking advantage of the H-1B system. And there have been documented cases and instances of this, as well as driving down wages while giving certainty to employers who truly needed high-skilled talent. And on background, officials stress that this is a one-time fee that applies to only new petitions, not renewals or current visa holders, and will take effect in the next lottery cycle. But even with these clarifications, this executive order represents a major shift in U.S. immigration and labor policy, because by imposing the $100,000 fee per H-1B petition and also introducing a gold card, green card pathway that costs between $1 to $2 million, the Trump administration is sending strong signals here that foreign workers will be far more expensive and difficult to hire, and permanent residency is only for the wealthy or the elite. So the biggest impact here obviously falls on Indian professionals, who make up nearly 70% of H-1B recipients. Many families who've built lives in the U.S. now face uncertainty, wondering if employers will still sponsor them, whether they should travel abroad, or even if their long-term futures are secure. And even though current holders are technically exempt, the announcement has already created this fear and confusion, which is destabilizing in its own right. The business implications are equally significant. Major US companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Meta, Intel, and Qualcomm depend heavily on H-1B engineers. And if the costs rise too high, the incentive may not be to hire American workers, it actually might be to move the job overseas, undermining America's innovation edge and taking away the aim of this executive order, right, in the first place. So that just doesn't affect tech. It also ripples to research, higher education, as well as the broader economy. And speaking of higher education, many universities have already issued advisories to H-1B holders that do not travel to India. Of course, that's with the uncertainty. The advisory may have been published and sent out before the White House has clarified, but this has had an immediate chilling effect. Indian students are the largest group of international students in the United States. They often choose American universities because the H-1B visa offers a path to stay and work after their graduation. And if that pathway looks prohibitively expensive or unstable, many will pivot to China, the UK, or Australia. This would mean fewer international enrollments, less tuition revenues for universities, and weaker talent pipelines for US employers.
All right, Priyanka Dev, thank you very much for getting us all those details and contextualizing this for our viewers as well. In fact, I'm also currently joined by Nicole Gunara, the Principal Immigration Attorney, Manifest Law. Nicole, welcome to NDTV. The White House says that this is in order to protect the American workers. Do you believe that this fee, it is going to have any significant effect, any real impact, especially on wages in the United States?
Yeah, I would like to say that based on like the White House's statements and their intentions, right? When you have this very high fee that is going to be imposed, it may incentivize companies to invest in domestic education or focusing on training on American workers. But when it comes to wages, I think one of the subtleties of the proclamation that not a lot of people are talking about is the directive to the Labor Secretary to increase prevailing wages. That means a shifting of an increase of the minimum wages for a lot of these roles, whether it's on H-1Bs or on permanent residents, and essentially those kinds of processes. Though I do think there could be an impact when it comes to an increase of wages, at least for these kinds of industries that rely on the H-1B and the like.
Nicole, there is also a fear that larger corporations, these big companies, they'll be able to absorb this fee very easily. But the smaller firms, they might struggle.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Like it is very possible that they may struggle because this is a very high fee. The reality is that $100,000 is not something to really scoff at. For a lot of startups that rely on a seed amount of money or a small amount of money to start, this can be quite prohibitive. But I will say that there could be some alternatives that people should be exploring to try to avoid over-relying or relying on the H-1B, because what we have seen from the news that has come out is the vulnerabilities that can come from over-relying on one type of visa for the entirety of the industry or parts of the sectors that are out there that utilize the H-1B.
Nicole, since this particular fee, it only applies to new visas and not renewals as clarified by the United States, the White House in the United States. What does it mean for the current H-1B holders, who are especially the ones who are waiting for their green cards or extensions?
So what this would mean for individuals is that they should really be prepared for alternatives. The only reason why I'm saying that is because what you just said earlier is that in the background, White House officials have confirmed this. However, when you look at the written word of the proclamation, it seems to not really distinguish between people who are existing and people who are applying for new applications. But even if, let's say, the government opts to just focus on new applications for people who are existing, I would say you need to start focusing on building yourself towards some sort of green card or something that is more permanent than the H-1B, because this could just be one step in multiple steps in a direction to try to disincentivize the entirety of the visa category.
I also want to understand the broader context here. Do you see this as a standalone policy tweak, or do you see this as a part of a larger White House strategy in order to restrict these high-skilled immigration? How do you look at it?
I think it's a push by the administration in order to process immigration reforms that we knew were coming down the pipeline. Did we know it was going to be through this kind of mechanism? The answer is no. But what we did know is that the government was trying to push people, or at least push the system, to focus on either the most extraordinary of talent or really restrict entry to focus on American jobs going to American workers. I do think this is one of many possible reforms that are going to be coming, whether it's in the next few months or the next few years. Essentially, this is why people need to be very focused and updated with everything that is going on in the immigration system.
Nicole, is there also a fear that this could create uncertainty for all these big US tech companies who are competing with global firms for talent? Do you think that can happen?
I do think that can happen. I think it does create a scenario where tech firms who may not be as familiar with other alternatives that are out there, in saying that, hey, the traditional playbook or utilizing the H-1B is no longer going to work. The usual things that we are most familiar with are now changing so rapidly. It can create a scenario where tech firms decide to say, hey, we're not going to compete for this. We're just going to focus on domestic talent and maybe not employ foreign nationals. But the one thing that I have to implore to many viewers here who do work in these global tech firms or even these industries that do rely on the H-1B is that alternatives do exist. There are other visas that are out there that are still not touched. And I think what's so important to focus on is on the statements that the White House did make when they were announcing this policy reform. Critical note is the fact that they were emphasizing extraordinary ability, guys. The reality is that extraordinary ability is a very specific term. It's utilized in other visa categories, and maybe that's what a lot of industries should be focusing on acquiring to maintain competitiveness on the global landscape, especially when bringing workers to the United States.
Right. Nicole, one final question from you. From a legal perspective, could employers now try to find loopholes, and especially or alternate visa categories in order to avoid this fee? Do you think that is also a possibility?
100%, absolutely. I think usually when there's these rapid changes, and I will tell you that under Trump 1.0, the previous administration that he was overseeing, essentially there were these significant changes that made people feel very distressed about the H-1B. This is not the first time that we're going to see wage increases. And what that really means is that companies do pivot. They start focusing on, hey, what are things that we can do instead of the H-1B? Should I be establishing J-1 programs? Should I be establishing O-1 programs to support my staff so that they can go into some sort of visa that doesn't rely on a lottery and doesn't rely on something that, especially the current administration right now, doesn't seem to really like. So that's kind of what you were kind of touching upon, is those exceptions, those alternatives, and kind of looking for these loopholes. I do think companies are going to be pivoting in that direction for sure.
All right, Nicole Gennaro, thank you very much for speaking with NDTV.